Nice delay to everybody. Greetings to everybody.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ta 당어주 덴지도 봐. 가서 다 드리니 뭐 숨바. 자대요래. 아니 다 가서 쉬원의 시즌에 이제는 뭐죠? 고랑 아니 롬니만 먹었죠. 타마 곰잡네. 동반이 그 대시에도 삼아. 아니 대야 동반이 대시가 대야 아니 거기 때내 주의 존재 야나 때내 답의 존재를 때내 동반이 콘수 주니 아니 다 간다라 동반이 콘수 주발라 때내 동반이 땡게 땡발라야 대바바도 며 대바 다 이 집에 대바견이 아니 땡발이야 땡 지랑게 땡지 송백권에 아니 장시주 동바시 송고도 뒤 송바디 감면 제기다 땡바 현담면 자가 있니 다 가서래 송담면 자가 인 제주 라는 메바지리 샤스 어디 송요다.
This is the third day of this explanation of the dependent origination praise to the Buddha for teaching dependent origination. And as I mentioned before, Gyümé Lama Tsongkhapa, that is, studied very widely and then meditated very deeply, and through that process he came to understand emptiness. And then when he first gained that insight into emptiness, that realization of emptiness, through depending upon the Buddha's teaching of how everything arises dependently or is dependently imputed. Through that understanding, then he had this very, very strong faith in the Buddha. He found the Buddha really amazing and expressed how amazing he thought that the Buddha was in these verses, and expressed his feeling that the Buddha was so different from any other teacher because of teaching about emptiness in this way, and for this reason described him as a peerless teacher. No.
다 된대기 전에 이 돈발이야 떠봤잖니 떠봤고 이 돈발 떠봤던 마세 이 돈바처럼 돈발라나 매바 지당 이 처럼게 땜베 이 땜바티 돈바다 땜바니여와 돈바테야 돈발라나 매바당 처럼게 땜바테야 땜발라나 매바 지레샤스 어디 송거다.
And what Gyümé said was that not just that the Buddha himself was a peerless teacher, but what he taught also was a peerless teaching. No.
Khensur 지단 잠불링 뛰나라 돈바 망보시다 요리스 참저게 남되는 돈바 망보시다 요리데 이내 키랑 돈바 좀 된데 키랑기 참저 남된 돈다 대 아니 때내 주 준제 와 때내 주비 준제 다 딘젤라 때내 아니 참저 제고베게 랍제든데 준거 요리스 디 랍제준랑 준제디 이 준제 현담면 잡아지다 어떤데 그 키랑 송단데
And he said that while there have been many teachers in the world, wonderful teachers who taught about loving kindness and compassion, he said that what really set the Buddha apart from other teachers was that even when he was teaching about loving kindness and compassion, it was somehow based on the fact of everything being being dependent and related, coming into being through depending upon other factors. No.
근데 나중에 삼로 땅바이나 알아서 사소소소 덤베 송바디 니 좀젠들 소소기 제바체네 때네 주의 준진지 니 참바다 니지냠네 체고가 갑자기 견다들 소소 제바체네 삼로 땅바이나 봐 아니 때스 거기 워터바다 디응거리 있어 봐 좀제시야 삼로 먹고 땅바이나 어떤 운에리시 때네 정말 인자 먼저 시행을 참지 제고고도 때네 초반인다 먼저 시행을 참지 제고도 시행을 너바게 지금도 채와 빵바 때네 주의 준제기 시행을 채와 빵고거리 어디서
And so if you think about it and you really check up, then what you'll find is it's really true that actually, because of the fact that everything is dependent, therefore I need to practice loving kindness. Therefore, I need to practice compassion. Because everything is dependent, therefore I shouldn't harm others and I should reject violence towards others. If we really think about it, we'll gradually be able to see that there is that kind of connection. No.
제가 다 된저게对吧다对别个남샤티写了对呢랑 지부 오니速度就 두고 매봐 그러봐 랑 지부 수질에 맞대면 두고 매봐写了对呢 두고 요바디 삼로 땅바이나 빼나 말아줘 팀장 지그리 와 대가내시 농바 계급 지그리 가리 얘나야 편주 찍을 때는 주바 샤다 삼로 땅바인 계급이나야 계급 변조리 총리 건가 신jel을 때네 소소 계급의 변조야 되고요 만도 신 수지엔 계급 수질에 맞된 바 아니 랑자토에 서로지 계급지 수토야요 말이지 계급을 차셔는 대가는 침산지를 차셔봐 이나야 김산디 내다 야고 중도 맞주디 현다지를 때네 두고고요 그래서 총바이나 총야고 용바디 시행을 때는 두고래 시 수질에 때 먹어봐다 저와자 먹어봐다 시 수질도 총바디가 총야게 줘야요 요 말이지 디제들 차단도 삼로 다도 전에 삼로 차라스고 와 삼로 14로 망고 땅바이나 아니 소소 잠불링 딘데는 네바디 시행을 때네 시행을 때냐 때네 내게 요바디 시행거리
When we think about it, we can see the way that everything exists relative to other things, other factors. There's nothing that has any independent existence. Like there's nothing that exists without having to depend upon anything. If we think about our family, we can see that. If we think about our country, we can see that. The development of wealth and so forth depends upon others. There's no way that you can acquire wealth independent of others. It always depends upon others. Whether you're thinking about the national wealth and what do you call it, finances and so on, or whether you think about the family, how things are at home, it all depends on others. If you think about conducting business, it's just not possible to conduct business independent of anybody else. So if you think well, then you'll see that as long as you're living in this world, you're dependent upon others. No.
제가 tinjege neju samlo tangde shenjila tegu yobati neju shenju samba tebege neju disne nam takanda neju de susu sebon otruyundu entesatela nova jeju maris sewa jeju maris tesatela ani chambada ningji ki samlo tango ris di tangbayina ani rangla kebe yore wa tesatela nova jebayina There's a de la Tsawa Chebayina, tell at in a rana dungayu. Shela Tosa de la Nekena, Savachena, Rana Dunga in Biore, Cheta Rani Dunga Dugi or Marvas. Dunga Meduba in the Shela Togu or Tosa de la, and never teach you or Mari, and Savachi your Mari, tell a Chamba the Ninji Dan, some of the Tambayana, and Rana Digi is what did it.
So then, when you understand clearly the way in which you depend upon others, then it's only natural that you wouldn't want to harm others. Since your well-being depends on them, of course you're not going to want to harm them. You're not going to want to do anything violent towards others. You'll see that it's only natural that what you need to do is to regard them with loving kindness and compassion. And if you do that, then you are the one that gains from that. Whereas if you harm others, then you're going to be harmed. If you harm others, you're going to experience suffering. And nobody likes to suffer, do they? So by thinking about this dependent nature of things, then you see that, what you need to do is to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and so forth towards others.
Or Tinjig Chene, in the Nambeg Tadu Shebe Kala, Tawa Tenjun Da, Java Tawa Maba Soyati, or Disungo,
And that's why it is that when we are, when we talk about the Buddhist belief system, then we speak of the view, somehow philosophical view, let's say, of things is that of dependent origination, and the conduct, like the way of leading one's life, is described in terms of non-violence. No.
Tagananshi, Tangaranzo, Michizo Jina de Samba, Missula Yinayang, Sosodan, Tumbudan, Ta Semdani Wodan, Tumbuya, which in the Devaina, and teach you social trouble Mambodan, will teach you social Samba Kiwi, Michizo de Samba, Milia. Michel Tun, social negative, there's a meeting, social Tumbuchin, the Devain, social Sambakiwa, the Yagayo. Ta Michizo Jin Deva Kanshila, and there's a meeting, the social never tia the Savachitana, and social in a Kiwi Mari, Shele in a Kiwi Mari, Sambakiwi Katsugi in Pa. Tesatela and Tumbuchava in a teacher rang some giver in Guyavati, Maranzo, Nyamotone Hako to us.
And in fact, we can see from our own experience that when we're living in a society, so long as we live in harmony with the people around us, as long as we're friendly towards others, then we're happy. We're happier. We know that. We know that that's how things are. We see that we depend upon others, and so because we depend upon others, then we try as much as we can to cultivate loving kindness towards others and compassion towards others, and that brings happiness for ourselves. Whereas if, despite the fact that we depend upon others, we harm others, we harbor malicious thoughts against others, then we suffer. We're unhappy. We're going to be unhappy. And we know that from our experience.
Oh, Tinjin do Samba, that Dene Tuba, Dene Chua Sa Digi, Dembeg Lamdona Shabeg, Dendil Sa, 60 Tundala, Wadomasona, Jimbata Masona, Tara Mabu. Dedan, Dendan, the Rimbala, Samlo Tangbain, Tara Mobu Shidayo, Tara Mobu, the deal told any remaining Besu solo, Samluna, any Gomjas name, no combatant, in the Zutia, Cheva Yina, any Takanga turn to a Shata Risha, Sambeki, Ta Matuba Tuba Chiam into some and Samlo de la Nishinia, Tapendo you.
And so when we reflect on this fact of everything coming into being through depending upon others, everything being related to others, existing in relation to others. And when we think about, because there are different levels, there are many different levels of profundity, some more superficial ways, coarser ways in which things are dependent, others are the more subtle. There are these various levels at which we can understand this dependent nature. So if we meditate on that and we really check up on that, then we will see really how very clearly how everything exists dependent upon other things.
No, what is it? The in the summer, that doing to a shata yimbati, so in what to in the summer, Matuba to a chia midu sambeke, Suchila Matemba to Yachitani midu sambeke, some logic. Laying delay to samba, that the Samlotila, that shift Matuba to a chia mevek, Samlotila, yeah, Samlot Chara Mangoyori. Samlotela. And Tandanga to tend to a shared Uma Tenju and Luxishachini, Shegiori, Tenju and Lucian, Kalaya, Matemba, Tuba, Meva, Indu Samba, and Rangshin Tuba said, Mindu Sambe, Rangono Tuba, Ranshi Tuba. Just a Rangshin Tuba, the Rangono Tuba said, Sick Digi, Koal and Daddy, Suchil and Matuba Tuba said, Kitty Rangono Tuba said, Sick the Tandate. Kalaya Matemba Tuba Sigor. Kalaya Matemba Tuba, the Mindu Sambeg, any Samlo Coindu Samba, or the Rangshin Tuba said, Yasa Maria Sambe, Semlaya, Nyavanyala, Di Jumzela Tendata, Semla Nyavanyala, Pendol.
So you see, everything is dependent. Everything exists in by depending upon others. So when you see that, then what you see is that there's nothing which is completely independent. So that also can be understood on different levels. Now here, because this is Lama Tsongkhapa's praise, the dependent arising praise. So it means that we're talking on the level of the Prasangika system, according to whom the fact that nothing at all exists independently is taken to imply that there is therefore nothing that exists by its own nature. There's nothing that exists from its own side. Which means that, because when we say, not exist, when we talk about existing from its own side or existing by its own nature, what that actually means is not depending upon anything at all. So understanding that there is nothing which is completely independent of anything, then that understanding brings you to the understanding there's nothing that exists from its own side. In other words, understanding that nothing exists independently helps you to understand that there is nothing which exists from its own side, nothing that exists by its own nature. No.
The Samlotanga, the Cheshi Javaderwa, Cheshi Javadi, Kansala Samlotamba, Pungula Samlotamba, Tanda Ni or Chishing Wilson, but the Cheshi Kansa, Kansa Sayadi, Tutan the country to you made the Samlotani, and Kansa the Tony Tubata, Tene Chumake, Namsha Samlotan, and tell her then Kansa the Kanaya, Sula Matuba Tuba, Remedus and the Samle, Kansa and Shidi Matubas, teach all some Koyor, Cheshi Kansa, when somebody did that Cheshi Pumbuji, when somebody, so Pumbu the Samlotani, Pumbu the Jude Jen, Yana Chashi, Kanle, that Tene Tuba, the Tene Tuba, Namcha, the Samlo into some shoot, telling Yabashuk when you do, T. Junzella Tene, or that Pumbu and she too sad, Sawan and Jim in those and begin, similar young Yabanyala, 편도 연구를 봐.
Now, we can think about this in relation to different, different bases, let's say, different bases. What I mean is that you can think about it in relation to the person, that dependent nature and so forth in relation to the person, or in relation to the aggregates, the skandhas, or the psychophysical aggregates, body and mind aggregates. So now, in the case of the person, when you're thinking how the person comes into being, then you come to understand that the person comes into being relative to other things, depending upon other things. It has a dependent origination, so it arises depending upon other things. And this all leads to the conclusion that the person is not independent, doesn't exist completely independent of anything else. And so then when you turn your attention to the aggregates, when they're taken as the basis, then you can see that those aggregates, our body and mind aggregates, depend upon cause and conditions. You can see that they depend upon parts. And when you see this very clearly, then that really helps you to understand that, therefore, those aggregates, because they're dependent, cannot exist from their own side, cannot exist by their own nature, independent of anything else. No.
강사랑 신지 맞추발랍주 삼바 텐주야로라 강사가 다메 참모 와 풍부전 신지 맞추바스도 텐주야로라 취지 다메 참모 제도 텐주야로 강사게 다메 참모다 취지 다메 참모서야 강사게 땡도 랑신지 맞추바디 강사게 다메 참모다 풍부 땡도 랑신지 맞추바디 취지 다메 참모 다 돌나 강사 마인베 취 풍부요리 칠 nga랑 주주도 발로 풍부리 주주마도 발라 풍바 가와사다 강바다 리 강긴 다도 리라와사다 다도 강게된 게 에네랑 시제마도 바디 체지다메 참모스기리 왔다 된제스 텐조라 강사 다메 참모다 체지다메 참모서 원송다디 체시군의 샤단도 오도스레
the emptiness of the person existing by its own nature. In other words, you could say the non-existence of the person by its own nature would be the subtle selflessness of the person. That's according to this Prasangika system, right? And then otherwise, the aggregates, phenomena or objects which are other than the person, things other than the person, such as the aggregates, their absence of existing by their own nature, that would be the selflessness of phenomena. So it's very important to understand that in this Prasangika system, the difference between the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of phenomena is in terms of the thing which has that quality of selflessness. When it's the person, then it would be the selflessness of the person. When it's something other than the person, such as when you consider those factors which are somehow connected with our own continuum, like the aggregates, then that would be the selflessness of phenomena. But then also the selflessness of things that are not connected with our continuum. Such as houses and mountains and various things around us, that would also be the selflessness of phenomena.
와 강사랑 시지 마주바 풍보랑 시 마주바 사디 텐주가 투모 마인도 샤다데 다 좀더 오마나 텐지 켈랭게레데 이내양 아니 강사가 다음에도 취지 다음에 샤다디 텐주와다 면자와 샤비요. this 인디 샴들라 먼저 계제시도 같이 전도 가버려. 인디가 뭐 맞듯이 되는 거지.
So that's the way that the Prasangikas see things, how they explain things, and that's unique to them, distinguishing between the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of phenomena in that way. In the lower systems, such as the Svatantrika and below, it's different. They have a different idea, and this is something that will probably come up later. So they do, those lower systems, just like the Prasangikas, they do accept the idea of dependent origination, but the idea of what it means and what it refers to, that's not the same as with the Prasangikas. So this is something that should come up later as we go through the text.
땅아조 가상 삼디 식제 가발에 장가대 하고 마서 디지랑 신남 되시.
No. So if we go back to the text then, carrying with the text, so we had finished verse 16 and we are now on verse 17, where it says, therefore, who could challenge you, you who proclaim with a lion's roar in the assembly of learned ones repeatedly that everything is utterly free of intrinsic nature.
디지랑 신남 되시 생게 다이 야도 케베 초소 레송바 딜수 고만도 디르와 지게디 다 디응모마 지게디라 가르송 바레스나 랑시주 조바 여나 네 디송 바라바 랑시주 조바 여나 냥데 톱세야디 다 유하요 말이스 랑시주 조바 여나 랑시주 조바 짐바디 아니 짐바파야 메바 차도 랑시주 조바 짐바파야 메나 냥데 톱바데 중고 말이스 그러와 아니 냥데 톱 가인스는 쉐 탐제 랑시주 조바 조바들레 도요 말아와스 와 어디 순거 디타마디 랑시 조바 요나 냥에도 내가 미롱시인사 디제 시제 타마도 어디리.
So you see the previous verse, what it was saying was that if everything, just suppose everything did exist by its own nature, then you wouldn't be able to abandon the mind that grasps at or apprehends things to exist from its own side. And since you wouldn't be able to abandon that, then there would be no way for you to achieve nirvana. So this all comes down to the fact that since everything, you consider everything to exist by its own nature, then you wouldn't have refuted existence by its own nature. So you couldn't abandon the grasping, and because you don't abandon the grasping, then you wouldn't be able to achieve nirvana. No.
다단다 지제데 디지랑 신남 제시 시간 당보디게 텐제 인단 준전 딜레라 때네. 봐. 아니 domba쯤된 되게 최탐제 랑신지 나바초 랑신지 주바다 나바 탐제도 차와지스 디지랑 신남 제시. 봐. 최탐제 랑신지 주베게 주바다 차와지스 전에 맞아네. 다 숙치모 송요리스.
So now what this says here in this verse 17, the Lama Tsongkhapa makes the point that you, the Buddha, taught very strongly, very emphatically that all phenomena, everything which exists, is free of existing by its own nature. No.
생계 자이야도 세치도와 생계 자이야는 간다 란신지 투바 요 말이 쓰데 수야들라 아니 지과 매봐. 먼저 맞으면 딱 계제디 시야 소소는 먼저 맞으면 계제 장고지 시야요나 장고 시야바들 뽑아요리 아니 수치를 시고고요 말이 어디는 지전에 란신지 투바디 나바탐제도 차와 레스 전에 아니 tanda dina singi dai yang to singi dai so de xian le jigba me be go ne yan ni yang to ni song ta kya ba ja ta gu song ba is
And when it says, you who proclaim with a lion's roar, what this implies by saying, with a lion's roar, what that implies is declaring it without any fear of others. So the thing is, when you're speaking the truth, then it's much more easy to speak with confidence. So that's what the Buddha taught, with great confidence, with the lion's roar, great confidence, no fear of others, repeatedly, something that he taught repeatedly, in the assembly of learned ones.
kebe soso le soma dila suyi gongba de ne sigido wa jedan tindege ni keba jata go uso ranshi ji tuba de chetamje ranshi ji tuba na ba tamje de chaba de yani yang to songba tela ani ta kansa suji gi ni zoba ja tugo de ja toya ko la yo ma des suda timbe ko ni ani zhe tugo ma des ta wa 먼저 무슨 따세던 뒤서마 랑시지 주바 메 스전 숨에 탐자 되라 아니 리바마가 수기 쩌바 이나야 니 탐자들 랑시 주바 메사 탐자디 먼저 무슨 그게 탐자 또래야 그러봐 지투고 말이 스딜 수 쩌바 수지게 아니 수대 되면 쩌바 쩌투야 요 말이 송말
So there, where it says in the assembly of learned ones repeatedly that everything is, actually, so it's in the first line in the English. Therefore, who could challenge you? So the point this is making is that the Buddha repeatedly said this, taught this in assemblies of many learned beings, learned people. And so Lama Tsongkhapa says, nobody can argue with you. So it's like that assertion, nobody can argue with, nobody can sensibly argue against. No.
고와 신다가 저바 두고 말이스 가레스나 랑시지 매베 주지디 주지 땡지 양타리스 봐 랑시지 매베 주지디 아니 단다 땡지 이베 좀제저시 시매바 두고요 봐 디 주지디 주지 양다바다 템바탕 텔라 빼양다 여바탕 아니 텔라 삼로 땅바이나 아니 녀바 녀야지 요리스 랑시지 주발라 아니 녀바냐 요 말이스 틴디기 차네 아니 켜바 수식이 경 아니 딜레야 저바 수준지 저바 수야 저 두고 말이스 말
When it says nobody can argue with you, so the reason that nobody can offer a viable or sensible argument, let's say, is because the proof, the reason that's stated as a proof that nothing exists by its own nature, which is dependent origination, that's a flawless reason. It's a perfect reason. There are also, we talk about, in logic, we talk about stating proofs along with an example. And so there are also perfect examples in this logical proof. And not only that, but if you reflect on this, then you will be able to gain certainty about it. Whereas in the case of existing by its own nature, there's no way that you can gain certainty about that. No. No. Then we go on to verse 18. It says that there is no intrinsic existence at all, and that all functions as this arising in dependence on that. What need is there to say that these two converge without conflict? No.
Rashi Gaya Mabatan Sik Kodevotoa, Tomba Chimde de Cherang, Chunam Lang, Rangi Duve, Ransing Gaya Yoma, Junsatamia Yoma is Rashi Gaya Mabatan.
So the very first sentence here that matches with the Tibetan, that there is no intrinsic existence at all. So this is talking about the fact that the Buddha taught that nothing has even the slightest existence from its own side or by its own nature. No.
Rashigaya Mabata. Dila tene dichuis. Pena dila tene ju dila tene jebu dichungri sagi. And Shotamje Ranshi Juba Kaya Yomare and ju dila tene jebu dichungri sagi. Namsha Dinje and Namsha Tamje and Tomachum de Teba Sumba Nis.
And at the same time, you, the Buddha, taught about how this arises depending upon that, and like for example, depending upon this cause, this result occurred. So this is also something that you taught, and that's also completely viable. No.
Namshatamji Tebani Migedoa Mujikos, Migedoatan, Shijige Tendo, Ranshiji Cho Gaya Meba. Shichibu Te, and Pumba Javashaban, Pumba de Ranshiji Juba, Ranshiji Juba, Namia, Ranshiji Juba, Dutamia Mebatan. And the Pumba Rani, Jujin La Tene, Chua, Namsha Ni, Shi Pumba Chigi Tendo, Mingawa Shatuyo, is.
So where I said viable, the in this translation it says, I think it must be where it says all functions. So arising independence, this arising independence on that functions. It all functions. So then, so it mentions that these two converge without conflict. What that means is that, for example, look at a vase, right? So a vase doesn't have even a particle of existence from its own side. That's one thing. Then also the vase exists depending upon various, factors, causes and conditions and so forth. And so these two converge together. So like they work together, they exist together on that one basis, the vase, without any kind of conflict. No.
다 시치기 때도 진일 민가와 샤투고요. 그래서 땡규여와. 다 좀더 오마라. 아니 시치기 때도 란시지 주바 매바타 때니 조원이게 남샤 조투고요 말이스. 시치기 때도. 와. 땡규의 시치기 때도 민가와 조투고요. 그래서 좀더 오마라 디니 시치기 때도 가와차되고요. 그래서
This is the Prasangika system. It's only in the Prasangika system that you find this possibility of positing those two on one single basis. In other words, one thing to which both of those apply, not existing by its own nature, and also existing depending upon cause and conditions. The lower systems of tenets in Buddhism, they can posit the idea of existing dependently, and they can posit something not existing by its own nature, but they can't posit those two on one single basis without, for them that being a contradiction. No.
이제 다 디오마한테도 직제 디오마한테 도를 시치기 때문에 민가와 샤투고리 이제 되네 디오마 직제데 때네 주에 준zen지 타다와라 미데시 렉순 딘는 고주지 마와라나 메베 주스.
And then let's go on to the next verse, 19. It is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme. That you've declared, that you've declared this excellently is the reason, O Savior, of your being an unexcelled speaker. No.
죄송아.
No.
다디 가르스 거르스나 때내 주에 준제지 타다와를 미대시스 봐. 때내 주에서는 다 주되게 딜라 때내 주에 준제지 타다와를 미대시 타다스나 탈진베 따와 러시 주주버 진베 따와데 탈진베 따와래 봐. 때내 주에 준제지 아니 가르소래 탈진베 따와라 아니 예바 미대시 봐. 타다라 미덴바 송바 디스와다 타다라 미 타지메 따와를 땡게 말이 송바 디 레송 시드 삼바 tomba chumde chirangi ni mawalana mewa chisna lebar sumba tatirishas lesons
Di sumba yingsan ani de mawalana meba re deni
mawalana meba.
So this is saying that the Buddha taught that because of because of in other words, for the reason of because of existing through depending, therefore one would not lean towards, to use the translator's terms, it would not lean towards an extreme view. So here this is talking about the extreme view of the extreme view of grasping at things as existing from their own side or truly. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, because you taught that, therefore you are, a peerless teacher. No.
Tanda dirawa tene chuwe chuze. Ta tene chunga sayadi dashi shen la tene chunga, gyujin shen la tene chunga. Ta khandar tunda dirawa. Ti gyunzen la tene, ane tanda karingo. Tachi je tatawa, tata de cheda zimbe tawa la tengi mari chene. Rwa tene chuwe gyunzen ji rangshi ju chuba yo mari sunya ti tunda dire. Tatawa la mites, rangshi ju chuba tawa rashi ji chuba zimbe tawa la mite she sungba ti ani kerangi keje shedandi shenda medabe keje shenda che rishas on diso ngana pege dina.
No, isn't the tarda said that tazingi tawa nija kuguris
tachi taniga tata cheda niga ta zimbe tawa pena dirwa rashi ji chuba zimbati 타즘 정도로 와.
노래래.
랑시지 매나 타 랑주바다도 랑시지 매나 매주고 싸와니 매바 차주고 그래서 때네 매바 좀 바디 체다로 와. 딘디게 인타치지 타쯤에 따와라. 미데 그냥 송바디 그냥 송다 현다 매자게 제주지.
미텐세디 카리코도 하진기 따와 레기 말에 서로치 시기.
때내 주에 준진기 랑시지 주가 요 말이 송바로 와.
네네.
인자 랑시 주가 요 말이 손데 랑시지 주가 준비 따와텔라 미템바.
네네. 미템베스는 징기 말에 서로치.
오지. 때내 주에 준진기 랑시지 주가 준비 따와텔라 미템바스도 좀 따와디다 야나 라시 조바쯤에 따와다 미템바스데 템보메베 계절에 고야요.
네.
어디 레퍼송바.
레나. 테니 조이 군싱기 세테 테니 조이 인상 란싱기 마드바레스.
레스. 티가 라시 조바쯤에 따와티. 미템바스네 야보메바스네. 다 기제 베겔은 야보메바.
Last. So where it says, it says it is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme. Okay, so that's one thing. So when it says through the reason of dependent origination, what that means is that the Buddha taught because everything is a dependent origination, therefore it doesn't exist by its own nature. So since you're using that reason, or since he taught that for that reason, being a dependent origination, therefore things don't exist from their own nature. In that way, there will be no leaning towards an extreme. Okay, so extreme here refers to the two extremes. There's the nihilist extreme and there's the eternalist extreme. Let's say, the extreme of existence and non-existence is sometimes how they're called. So because of reasoning in that way doesn't exist from its own side because of being independent arising, therefore in one way of looking at it, what it means is you wouldn't fall foul of those two extremes. But there's another way of understanding this where it says does not lean, because the Tibetan word has the idea of like you will not depend upon. What it means is it will become like what do you call it? Those views would become sort of like unfirm, unsteady, because it's like you because of this reasoning, it's like they would become bad. Your views would become bad or turn bad, something like that. You wouldn't have those extremes anyway. You wouldn't tend towards those extremes. No.
Maolana maybe to study to CJ.
And so anyway, no.
Digun Tombata Tele Dinde Chuai, Neba Nibu Pinto to Gyümé Choche Pass.
And so anyway, for that reason, you're a peerless teacher, unexcelled speaker. So then verse 20, all of this is devoid of essence, and from this arises that effect. These two certainties complement each other with no contradiction at all. No.
Digun Tombata Tele Dinde Chuai, so that Digun Tomba Tang said, Karsung to Suna. Digun said, Chinag over Digun Tamje, Chidanago over the Tamje, or this one. Moyo Tomba Tang, sudden, and Tada, Modi Rashi Jube Tomba. Moyo Rashi Jube Tomba Tangs, or this one, Digun Tomba Tang.
So let's see that first line, all of this is devoid of essence. So that's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is all of this, the essence of all of this is empty. Empty meaning empty of existing by its own nature. And when it says all of this, what that means is all phenomena, all outer phenomena and all inner phenomena. So all phenomena, their nature or their essence is empty of existing from its own side.
Dile Dinde Chuans, any do dilla tene devu di chunga. Yana, Dashi dilla tene, Dashi di chunga, say, Niugurwa. Jida, Moyo Tomba Tetan, any do dilla tene devu di chunga, Namsha Nis. Yana, Dashi la tene, Dashi chunga, Namsha Nis.
Gudila dene de Jebu Dijon down, Dajila dene de Dachu.
Dashi la tene, Dashi chunga, Pena, do dilla tene devu di chunga, Dujela Madu Jaya Ma. Da Dumachela Cheban, Dashi la tene, Dashi chunga, that Dendi said, Chetamjel Rowa. Chetan, Rangshin Jutuba, Neva, Tetang, Chila tene, Chik chunga, Namsha Dini Nisur.
These two certainties, Dikung Ho Tombatang, Dile, Dini, no. So yeah, you got on the one hand you have that, so the everything is empty of nature, and then also in the second line it's saying from this arises that effect. So this can refer to this cause giving rise to that effect. But then that only refers to compounded phenomena, whereas dependent arising, which is what we're talking about here, actually is applicable to everything which exists. And so we can Also, or alternatively, understand this as meaning, depending upon this basis of imputation, this imputed object exists. So then you have a way of formulating it that would include everything which exists. And so these two certainties, so the certainty that everything is empty of existing by its nature, and then that this depends upon that, those two certainties are what's being referred to here, and those complement each other.
주 탐제 랑시 주주베 통바탕 아니 주 칸다 칸이나 지라 때네 중요베 남샤 니부티 수수 하코나 진짜기 예반이 니부티 봐 랑시 주주방 랑시 좀 맞주방 예베 예시 직당 안 지라 때네 직중 예시 니부티 아니 편주 개와매 봐 봐 편주 개와매 봐 마세 아니 지기지라 아니 초치도 is 펜토도 삼로 디니 땅땅디 삼로 지기지래야 예반유부 편주도 진정이 신이보디 편주도 개미야 벌써는 지기지라 뇌바 많이 봐 봐 아니 지기지라 초치 봐 초치기 is 어디서 뭐
So you have those two being empty of existing by nature, and also the dependence of various phenomena on other factors, depending upon this and that. So when you understand these two, when you understand these two, you see that they do not contradict each other, and it's not just that they don't contradict each other; they actually support each other. So where it says here, these two certainties complement each other. Anyway, so this isn't you don't really see this in the English. So what it says is they complement each other. Is that how he's dealt with it? They complement each other without obstructing each other. And there's a sort of like a connotation of when it says obstruct, like harm each other. So in other words, they don't they're not only not contradictory, but they even support each other. That's the point. No.
디샴데라 딜레 와타르 주바탕 아디페 시다기 얌쳔보 시고라 운에전에 랑시지 매방예베 로티당 아니 편주지기지라 때네 주베게 아니 녀바 디베 녀시티니니 지기지래야 편토 그요바다 지기지라 가소래 객매바잖아 네바 마체바 지조지 송와티 운에전에기다 가소라 뭐차도 줘봐지 어디서 와.
Then it goes on to say in the next line, the first line of verse 21, what is more amazing than this? So there Lama Tsongkhapa is expressing the idea that actually to be able to teach that things on the one hand are empty of existing by nature, and at the same time exist dependent on other factors, and that teaching that those two not only don't contradict each other but even support each other, this is really most amazing. No.
나 디전다 지제 오마데 딜레 와자르 주바다 딜레 메도 중화강 주디 쥐라 되나니 되버리 주지 신도 민사 지제들이 다나도 지제.
No. And so it says, what is more amazing than this? What is more marvelous than this? If one praises you in this manner, this is real praise, otherwise not.
제가 편주 개와 매발, 그와 지조 지도 송아디 시다기 양첨 오사 첨보리스 은 딜레메도 중화강 다 딜레를 하가지 요 말이스 좋아 딘지 인자 가령 못한다 딘지지 고네 다 동바쯤데 저랑 한다 제를 못 치게 동바쯤데들 떠바 피고요 와 떠바 피도서 막 떠바 피단디 동바쯤데 저랑 마왈라나 메바리샤 가르레스는 저랑 숭야디 덴디에게 최 송니 엔처탐자라 시디 마트베게 남샤디 숭고도 이 시타게 이 원사침보다 매도 중앙이스 다 저랑 덴디 숭고도 전 주디 켜라 되는 또 맞춘데 저랑 덴디 나외 거네 이 갈소래 다최최최람들 잡아디 남들 잡아 가서 취 tom바디 딘데스네야 tom발에 tom바표와디 취디 켜라 떠다니 떠버 주지 다디 떠방운에 제스 다 떠방운에 레스 디미 준데데 저랑 구수 첨보요리 아니 꿀로요요리 울로 쭉도리요리 딘데 떠바표와이나 대점비 떠바스케 두고 말이스 다 덴디 사미 치용아이베 권 떠발라 떠바디 떠바 라나메바지 레스 어디서 왔다.
And so you see, when it says what is more marvelous than this, it means that there's nothing superior to this. And so let's remember that, here, Gyümé Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, is praising the Buddha. And he's praising him as a peerless teacher. That's how he's praising him as a peerless teacher for having taught that everything is empty of existing by its own nature, and at the same time is a dependent arising. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, to praise you for having taught this, that's real praise. Other ways of praising you are really not real praise in comparison to that. Like, for example, praising the Buddha for the light that's emanating from his body, and praising the Buddha for the crown protrusion, the Ushnisha. That's not, in comparison to this, that's not real praise. This is real praise. Praise to you for having taught that. No.
좀 된데 최랑게 덴지 사미 최 덤베 고네 아니 최탐자랑 시기만도베 남샤도 송고도 디인자 최랑 덤바신데 men다와제 레샤 세니야 덤바피아디 덤바 약슈리스 로아 투모마이베 덤바데 데리스 오티소와
덴데 자모라 덴데 자모스 숭베인사
덴지 사미 최 숭베 고네 아니 최랑 덤바디 덤발라나 메바리스 마왈라나 메바리스 또 덤바디
No. In other words, there are many different ways that one could praise the Buddha, and Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that praise to the Buddha for having taught profound dependent origination, that's the best way to praise the Buddha. No.
고물루지 자와시라 좀백깔라 자와시라 고 당보대 떠발라 쳐바지단디 강게 땡지 저거죠 가바메바 띠메바 쳐바메바 담메바 디제스니 야 땡제 가서 제다 저거 뜸베게 떠바텔라 차차로 두스떠바 피요리스
So for example, in the in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom verses, he starts off with a verse of praise which which expresses the freedom from the 8 extremes. I think it's called the 8 extremes, like the no coming, no going, no I can't remember anyway, but anyway, those eight things. No.
What is it? That didn't Dishamdela CJ Omader da. Gombe tend to Suai, kanshi chö da she da ba ti rang she me ba da mi su ju la cha ji yus odi
no konda ngandi chi cheyesre da ani the low ludgi ani the sashegi ani
awa she ra tum ba ka la
no
tum ba la to ba phu dan ti
no
da di ka ri go
no
ten di tum ba chum de chirang ge ani chö sung ba da de ten di nga ba ko ni tum ba chö sung gu tu chen ni to ba phu ro ba
no
디 제가 덤발로 떠봐 풀다는데 땡땡하게 갖고는 덤발로 떠봐 풀고 저기 어디
because the Sawashergi
주주
no. Yeah, so I thought I'd missed something there. The point is that there also Nagarjuna is praising the Buddha for having taught dependent arising. So then we go on to the next verse, verse 22, which says, being enslaved by ignorance, those who fiercely oppose you, what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence? No.
다 디스틱이 가르친 거라서는 다 단다 때내 주에 준제지랑 시제 마주바 송바로와 시제 마주바 송베 남샤데 마토나 뭐라 남샤데 마토나 아니 템베게 전다 닝부 저거데 다 또고 말해서 다 전다 되리 봐. 다 몸배 전도 송에 식당보데 어디르시 몸배 전도 송와 있어 몸바스나 단다 몸바텔라 아니 배나 가사다도 좀 봐. 봐. 야나 취지다도 좀 몸바 다 이제 송교와 가사다도 주바 좀 몸바다 취지다도 주바 좀 몸바 어 딘제기 아니 몸배 왕도 송네 몸배 전도 송와서나 몸바 티기 아니 전도 송 전세도 요보스기 와 남주 다 당진기 몸바 티기 아니 요보다고 찬 봐 몸배 전도 송와이 kanshi chö da xie zha ba ni tinjege dangzingi moba tegi ondo son yobo zha ba cha che ni chö tam jara ji chu ba res ba rang de chu ba res jen tinjege ni mobe chen du so wa tinjege res nge de kansa de yor ba pena chiru ba de zo ko nge disigi yor ba o tinjege ni tombal야 다 tomba 지금 tomba 좀 된데 제가 지금 민도스 전에 셰제바 tombal야 다지 뭐좀 맞으네 게다다 붙여봐
Nice.
어디서 뭐배 전도 송아이 같이 쳐다 셰제바
So here, when it says enslaved by ignorance, so this ignorance refers to the two types of grasping at the self of the person and grasping at the self of phenomena. So enslaved by, so it's like saying, they are the servants of ignorance. So those who are the slaves or the servants of ignorance who fiercely oppose you, fiercely oppose you. In other words, because of being under the control of ignorance, like for example, there are certain non-Buddhist philosophical systems which teach the complete opposite of the Buddha. So that's what this is talking about. Fiercely oppose you in the sense of speaking in the complete opposite way to you because of being under the control of ignorance. No.
다 딘제게 몸배 전도 송행에 강사 등주 랑시 메벤다 tomba chumde de 랑시 요 말이 숨에 다디 송인도 삼바 콘조 미수가 차비요 리스 이제 자는 디마소 삼베 와 레송아
No 그저 디마소 삼니다 no
단다 tomba chumde de 계란기 랑 산지 chumde de 랑시 마투버리 숨고요 와 이 숨바 되라 아니 미수바 지겨워스 자 와. 뭐 배나 수지고서는 배나 치료봐. 와. pena karsore tenje ke malange churuba de yorwa tenje ke malange churuba tunjuge en tomba chumdende cho tamje ran sige ma to bari sumba tela ni kejada maso mida maso nawa dugu yo maris on misuba wa nawa dugu yo maris ine nawa mado batala chida ke whatsa ju kan yo maris 미수기라 차지 지다가 원자 치고 그냥 가에서 콘도 텐지 켈링이 요 말. 텐지 켈 말에도 선바 랑시기 매바 랑시 투바 요 말이 송유도 선바 텔라 나와마 투바 차바텔라 지다기 얌세야 켈미도 우승거.
When people like that, so we're going on to the two other lines where it says what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence. So these there are these non-Buddhist systems, certain Hindu systems, who don't accept the idea of dependent origination. So in that case, when the Buddha says nothing exists by its own nature, it's not really surprising that they wouldn't be able to tolerate that they would think that's kind of like that's a bit odd kind of thing. They would find it odd. That's not so surprising. No. Because they don't accept dependent arising.
So
the fact that they, given that they don't accept dependent arising, the fact that they wouldn't be, particularly impressed by the Buddha saying, there's nothing exists by its own nature, that's not surprising because they don't accept it dependent arising. So it's not really surprising. No. Then he goes on to say in verse 23, but having accepted dependent origination, the precious treasure of your speech, then not tolerating the roar of emptiness, this I find amazing indeed.
Sura tada ini ta jeno dawo de pge kelene wa jeno nane en tene jwa kelane kiji sungi jebe tene jwa ta di ngaranjo rande chedama wa benan dode ba semda ba donjolo sungi wa di digi tomba chumde de sung nyamne che sung kelang en hadön de sungi nane eni ningbu tenje kelang tene jwa kelang ne wa tene jwa kelang ne ta tongni ngaro meseba ta sanje chumde de jera shituba yomare sungba tela meseba chiati jero moje dilla wasachi go to yamsengi to usu ta dilla koyo wasachi
No. Okay, so in the previous verse, it was saying that it's Lama Tsongkhapa was saying he doesn't find it surprising that those non-Buddhist followers, that don't accept dependent arising, that they wouldn't really believe the Buddha's teaching that there is nothing that exists by its own nature. But now, those who are your followers, so he's addressing the Buddha, those who are your followers, who practice what you teach, who accept dependent arising. So here we're talking about, for example, the Vaibhashikas, the Sautrantikas, okay, so the lower systems and so forth. They accept your teachings, and especially they do accept dependent arising when they can't stand your teaching that nothing exists by its own nature. Now that really is amazing, Lama Tsongkhapa says.
tanda peji rangjuba shachogori rangjuba ani semzamba dodeba chitamo dije di kangangi tendri ki namsha kelingi yoris wa tendri ji namsha kelingi yorde ani rangshinju tuba rangshinju matuba sayadi kelingi yomari ta rangshinju matuba tsawane kelingi yomari kunzu tamche rangshinju tuba ris rangjuba meditisiwa 제가 덤베 랑시지 마투바 송바리스 콘조 아니 미스바 치아디 얌쳔버 간선 텐지 켈링기도 와스 텐지 켈레니 랑시지 투바 요마리 소야달라 미스바 치아디 시타 얌쳔버리스 어디스
Actually, this refers to the Svatantrikas, the next one down from the Prasangikas, also the Chittamatras, Sotrantikas, and the Vaibhashikas. So they all accept dependent arising, but they cannot accept that things don't exist by their own nature. They think that everything exists by its own nature. And so they can't stand it. They can't stand it when the Buddha teaches that nothing exists by its own nature. And so Lama Tsongkhapa is saying this is really quite strange. This is really quite amazing, actually, because, they do accept dependent arising. They won't accept that things don't exist by their own nature. No.
랑시게 마주베 동니 사야디 텐주베 투모 마이베 샤바 마도 아니 란주바 멘제기 랑시게 마주베게 동바니 사야디 자 샤투게요 말이스 가야서는 콘조치어 탐제 랑시지 투바 켈리게요 리스.
And because of the fact, therefore, that the Svatantrikas and below, the fact that they all assert that everything exists by its own nature, therefore there's no way for them to posit or to be able to accept the emptiness of existing from its own nature. So that's actually only something that the Prasangikas are able to do. And so this links back to what I was saying before. You see, the way of positing the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of phenomena, according to the Svatantrikas and below, is most distinct. It's very distinct from the way in which the Prasangikas posit those two. No. In the case of the selflessness of the person, they are not able to they're not able to posit, or they're not able to accept the selflessness of the person as meaning the emptiness of the person existing by its own nature. So for them, the subtle selflessness of the person refers to the person's emptiness of existing as something which is self-supporting and substantially existent. No.
다 디게 텐제 켈람바 지부 직장 차대요 리스 텐제 켈람바 직바 임발라 뜨네 주바다 때네 주 남샤드 켈람바 컨실라 니 터지 칸 슈바네 제 텐제 차라사 혼자 텐제 참어디 샤투고요 마 텐제 라바치 만도.
And I mentioned before, didn't I, that there are different levels of dependent arising. There are more subtle levels, there are more superficial levels. So the Svatantrikas and below, they do accept dependent dependent origination, but they can't accept the subtle, the most subtle level of dependent arising. No.
어디래? 진짜天주베게 텐제 제시 잡고요. 랑주베 텐제 제시 잡고요. 때 텐제들라 제시 띵sablu 차바르기 답변은 텐주베 텐제데 시라게 제시 띵사바 차고요.
And so in this way, you see that the Prasangikas do teach dependent arising, and the Svatantrikas and below, they do teach dependent arising, but the way that the Prasangikas teach dependent arising is much more profound.
진짜 가서 그랬다. 란주바 면체게 텐제 케랑 아니 텐제 케랑베 네 라시주 줘봐 요리 써야지 다 제름 버치게 단다 모사침보리스 얌침보리스 와도 어디다.
And so this is what the Lama Tsongkhapa is saying he does find amazing, which is that they would accept dependent arising, dependent origination, but they wouldn't be able to accept the idea of emptiness, the emptiness of existing by its own nature.
다 디오마 직제들 랑심멜라 찌웨고 라메 땡지 제중고 민이 지네랑신도 진나 타고 찌오디스.
Then we go on to the next verse 24, where it says, the door that leads to no intrinsic existence, this unexcelled door of dependent origination, through its name alone, if one grasps it, intrinsic existence. Now this person, I guess that's going to go on to the, anyway, so you can see it, that the rest of the sentence is in the next verse, but we'll have to leave it like that for now. No. No.
랑심멜라 찌웨고 스와 다 랑심멜라 찌웨고 사데 티리 오베네루 랑시지 메바 와 랑시지 메바라 찌웨고스나 랑시지 메바리야 티야키 고스고 랑시지 메바 하마고게 돈돌라 랑시니 메바 하코야게 치도 야 치발 람라 치버 잡아 찌웨고 가래서나 란나 메바데 티야가 탑시 약슈디 이 땡지 잡아 총와들이스.
It says the door that leads to no intrinsic existence. So in other words, so he's saying intrinsic existence, I've been saying existence by its own nature, so just different ways of translating, right? So the door that leads to, in other words, for the way to lead beings to an understanding of the fact that there is no intrinsic existence. Then he goes on to say this unexcelled door of dependent origination. So in other words, it's dependent origination which is the best way to lead people to an understanding of no intrinsic existence. No.
라시멜라 찌고 라메 땡지 텐주 민이 기네 랑신도 지나 타고 찌오디스 와 제가 랑시지 메발라 치아가 탑 약슈디 아니 땡지 잡아주면 남샤데리스 와 디 땡지 잡아주면 남샤디 아니 다 땡지기 민디 민이 기네 랑신도 지나스 땡지기 민딜라 땡네 랑시지 여버 지나스 거다 하디 랑주바 미지기 징겨와 오늘 제나 랑시 메발라 티야가 탑 약슈디 땡지 잡아주면 남대로 와스 좀더 오만은 땡지 잡아주면 민딜라 땡네 랑시지 여버 징겨리스 와 민이지네 랑신도 지나 타고 찌어대서 다 타고 써야돼 타니 써야돼 서로 쓰고래와 그래서
No. Yeah, so here then when it says so yeah, in with those first two lines, it's made he's made the point that the best way to approach no intrinsic existence is dependent arising. And then it says, when it says through its name alone, if one grasps at intrinsic existence. So what this is saying is that the lower schools understand from things being dependent arising, that they therefore exist by their own nature. The this stigma on kasana miniki ni sigda. The Jiran Tenju Yinsang and Ranjingi Drobarest Dilaguga, Marve. Miniki. No.
Ranshi Mebala, Tia Tavia Shudi, Lana Mebati, Tenji Tabachuan. There is. Tenji Tabachu Ming Dilla Tene, and Ranshi Yobar Zina Swata.
No,
Ranshi Yobar Zina. Zina Tago duties, Zingi duties.
So anyway, but that's what it's saying. The dependent arising is actually the best way to get to an understanding of how things have no intrinsic existence. But now he's talking about those who believe that things are intrinsically existent because of being dependent arising, dependent origination. No. No.
Tenji Ming Tuba. Tenji Ming Tube, and Rashi Yoba Zingi duties.
No.
Tenji Ming Tune, and Tila Tene Rashi Yoba Zingi, and Jupena Chitama Doteva to Kangarva.
Yes. So when it says about, through its name alone, what this means is that they don't understand subtle dependent origination, and so that's the basis, so they don't understand that. Then when they hear this word dependent origination, what they think is, since it's a dependent origination, therefore it is intrinsically existent. No.
Minijini Rashid Zinatago Gioti the Oma Tigeti Pacho Namji led Jube Jungo Data Tre Juruba Kiji Julbia Lamsadi Taguankin Tior Chas on
the. So then this connects to the next verse, 25. Just borrowing from the previous verse. Now this person who lacks the unrivaled entrance, well traveled by the noble ones, by what means should one guide him to the excellent path that pleases you?
Tadi Zina Tago Judas, Ranshi Juba Zingi Jutis, Judi, Pacho Namji, Lectures, Pachos in the Sanje, and Tanachi Namji in the Sanje, the Chanju Semba Lamlaya, Labar Drebegi, Jungo Sena, Labar Drebega, Pacho Namji Lecture, Jungo Data Jota, Dirwa. Pacho di Sanje Sha, and Namji said Sanje the Chenju Samba Namgi Lamlaya, Leopard Joba Chebe, Jungu, Juseg Goti, that Ted Chejubaro. Rashi Juba Zina, Zinging Judi, Ted Ched Juguris, Jungu Tata Chejuba.
So let's see this. So that person, okay, that person who hears dependent arising and thinks, therefore existing intrinsically. So they lack the unrivaled entrance well traveled by the noble ones. So it's not so obvious in the English, but anyway, where it says noble ones, it refers to the Buddhas and also to the Bodhisattvas. So so because they think that everything exists intrinsically because of being dependent originations, therefore they lack that unrivaled entrance well traveled by the noble ones. And kasada jungot dada
Jungu Data Television, 파초스는 산제로와
No,
아니 남사 산제의 전주 선반는 연락은 주벌 집에 주서들라 랑가도 무슨 니요 탑도 싫어 니요와 탑신이요 중고들 탑신이요 탑신이게 나네 랑시주 주버 여버드나 랑시지 매바 또비 싫어도 용사요 말와 랑시 매바 또비 싫어도 제주고요와 진짜 중고다다 제주봐.
Yeah, so this is talking about, you know, the when it says the unrivaled, the peerless and unrivaled entrance, well traveled by the noble ones, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So that actually refers to the two entrances, the two doorways or the two entrances, which means the method and wisdom. So such persons would be lacking the that unrivaled entrance, meaning they wouldn't have the wisdom side. They wouldn't have the wisdom understanding that things are empty of existing intrinsically. No.
중고다다 최지 기르부야 람사데스 또 좀된데 걔랑 투 제버려 줘야게 람상보 테스 탑 내가 리시 탑 관계권에 찍고 그래서 간선고 랑시지 요바 징기 요바 인자 내가 찍 랑시니 매발 티야 탑 요마라 봐 그랑시 매바 켈링게 매바 인자 엘 람상보 테라 티야디 내가 찍 리시 요마리스 어디서
Then it says, by what means should one guide him to the excellent path that pleases you? So in other words, for somebody who thinks that everything exists by its own, but it exists intrinsically because of being independent arising. So for the time being, there is no way to guide such beings to the excellent path that pleases you, which means the understanding that nothing exists by its own nature. No.
탑광 가서 탑광 기는 뛰어가지 내가 탑광기 권에 다 튀고 그래. 그래서 그도 간선 라시 매바 켈링기 매바 인장 탑시 요마리스 다 디기 식디기 아니 가르송 거였으나 간다 타반 양대 토발라 라시지 매바 또 고고요 와 라시 매바 또 콘소 라시 매바 켈링기 요마 라시지 요바 징기 요바 인자 진지 징기기 큐티 아니 내가 리시 라시 매바 티야 탑요 말이 인자 가르소래 다 담바니지 남샤레 냠바다고 차도 라시 요바 징겐데
So it's saying how, you know, for now, then how can such a person be led? So what this is saying is that in order to achieve liberation, the state beyond sorrow, nirvana, you do need to realize emptiness. In other words, you know, the emptiness of existing intrinsically. So for now, you know, for the time being, there's no way to lead such beings to that state of nirvana. And
한스는 담바니 샤발로 군접단 전담게 남샤 신고와 그 전담게 남샤디 그 시티고랑 심야바 시게 매바니다 그 남샤들 많냠돼요. 담바니 남샤 콩 친지 말로 봐도 그 시예요.
And no, and this implies also that there's, you know, that they can't get a proper understanding of the two truths. So the two truths, that means concealer truth and ultimate truth. So they can't get the ultimate truth because of the fact that they can't get the understanding that things don't exist by their own nature. No.
다 배제 니 직제데 디가 샤나 삼소 다 디엔더도 전다 데지 지난주 세부 마차바도 되나 양어도 저거 틀리 지난네 일 저거 직제나 모두 저거 유나 직단하러
So for now, then, I think I'll stop there on that verse. And if there were things that you didn't understand clearly, maybe if there are questions, I think that there are questions in the chat. Are you going to take over with this, Christina? Can't hear you. Can't see
Sorry,
you.
I was muted. Sorry, I was
That's
talking
okay.
on mute. muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. Did we have some time? I realized that that the Dalai Lama's teaching is actually tomorrow night. So did we have any questions?
Oh, Ale, Tirimarbe.
이리 말해.
Ale, sorry, so that was my mistake. It's tomorrow. Yes, okay.
Yeah,
'Cause the
no
days are
problem.
different.
No problem at all. So, so do we have some questions from any of the participants before we move along?
Okay, so it looks like there aren't any questions in the chat. There's all sorts of other things.
We have a
So-
question. Ellie is raising her hand.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you, Geshe, for teaching and Venerable T for translating. I wanted to ask if we could go over the difference between dependent origination and dependent arising, because I keep confusing them.
Oh, I'm afraid that's my fault, because actually dependent arising and dependent origination, there's different ways of translating the same word.
Oh, wonderful.
Dependent arising than dependent origination kepakari or is teaching and the Judang Midamata de Tibereslavi.
가르래 디
Now the Jesan Kashi the Tenjung said dear Tenjun said the Kurangi dinala and the Tudunjimagi dinala and Tenjung and the dependent origination like you do. Origination the origin kecha the young Mountio didn't like the dependent arising. Teni Jungwa arise said the Jungwa. No. Sen binigi kepakari or las.
얘네 중화다 나
Jesan
벽에
the Purgle Zug Juna the page the dependent arising senate that Teni arising Yalawa Dravachikudua.
얘네 주바 얘네 주바
Teni Lawa, Teni Jungwa, Teni the Ya Yoma Dravachik. The dependent origination, Jiran Senate the ko Jungsa Karesna and it Teni the Jungwa res. Did Dravachikudu, the Kebata Chirabindo.
다 벽에 나왔지나 얘네 중화 와 얘네 중화 사야지 치기라발 코나 두들라 얘네 제부디 중화 뒤제기 쳐라잖아 당한도 뒤제기 오버인게기 쳐라잖아 주젠들라 얘네 제부디 중화인다 얘네 중화스라 단지기 와 두마제기 쳐라잖아 얘네 중화사도 빼나 딱 봐도 중화서 유전을 때문에 중요해요 말때 중화디 초발라 샤 초발 사실 당시 될라 때문에 근데 다저디 중화서도 좀 다저디 초바 때문에 중화디 초발라야 고발려 오버렸잖아 둘라 때문에 대부 중화사야 되는 것도 곧 되고도 와
No.
사벨 중화서는 세들로라 차대고요 두마 제라 중화사야디 중사야 유전을 때문에 중에 깨자 말아 코라 두배 깨자 당시 신질라 때문에 두고요 와인다 때문에 두바사 지금 고아들
No. So despite the fact that those two terms are actually alternative ways of translating the Tibetan phrase, let's look at the Tibetan phrase. So you got the Teni Jungwa, so Ten means dependent. Jungwa, generally speaking, it means like to happen or to arise. So on a sort of superficial level, a sort of easier level on which we can understand it, it refers to the way in which results arise or happen dependent upon causes. So that works for what we call compounded phenomena. In other words, we could say maybe causative phenomena or things which are impermanent. So now that's not going to work for other things which are, don't arise through depending upon cause and conditions, permanent phenomena. So therefore, there's another way of understanding dependent arising, where the arising doesn't so much mean like coming into being through depending upon cause and conditions, but being established, still coming into being, but we use the word established. So that would refer to, for example, the way in which an imputed phenomenon comes into exists depending upon the basis of imputation. Okay, the imputed phenomenon, the thing that's imputed, coming into being depending upon the basis of imputation. No.
Oh, that's all. Oh.
No. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Doesn't look like we have any other questions. I did want to ask Rinpoche if he wanted to make some announcements about what's happening at his monastery, and I will go ahead and put the link to his monastery in the chat.
That the Gyümé any mudisi that the cause the Sigudasang call it any day nesu Gyümé. That was
단위 지단 자장 루주시 공부도 컨트롤 인명 내단데 니 쉬외는 되기도.
No. Yes. No.
토마 컨디션
No. Generally mudisi is because ninge labi in the gena that the jubchu call it the sunga dos and it is and that the Gyümé Gyümé sang. No. The kind of the common issues to the Tugaches under the Genare
다 니라디 하고도 저것인다 매나서
No.
아니 니가 되시죠 봐
No.
아니 다리기 나와들라 먼저 주된 찍만도 요 말이스 봐 주된 들인 나와들라 봐
No. So since it looks like there are no more questions, then there was one or two things I wanted to say. So this month, as you will all be aware, we only have this one session. Generally speaking, we're trying to have 2 sessions a month, but this month there's just the 1 session.
가이스나 드린 주된 지체 다스 드린의 손리 콘조게 탄다 세주 차장기 먼저 딸이 중이 조심라 denshog이 dumji sogi waris 봐 대쇼고 dumji 초바 마세 대쇼 dum지 개바 아니 dunsun기 경고 루체 대쇼기 dunsun기 경고상 다다 드리는 곳주고 dunsun기 경고상 경고상배 토네 아니 니마 경고상을 니마 지기 순신아 니마가 주지 경고상을 고고요리 니 니마가 주 경고상 차서나 아니 다리 바지 조금 잘 아니 대쪽에 다근체 다리 조금 아니 주시 정아 주도 접게 봐도 아니 대쪽 좀지 와
접게 봐도라
다리 접게 봐도 뒤버로라 대쪽에 경고지 단주리 아니 대쪽은 진시피야 아니 타마데 dunsun chul shamya 어딘데스는 니망가 주지 대쇼게 거는 초가 소야 도스리스
줍시 쥐앙아 주축 주둔 쪽에 니만
쭉
no
다리 주고
줄고 받으래 no 다간데 줍주 해야 돼 냠린다고 짓고 그러겠어
줍치서나 디 줍치서야 돼 미세게 대쇼게 거라 초가 땅니 초가 줍샤체와 경고를 줍 초바 피스야 돼 줍치스고 와 경고 줍니 아니 그 줍치사 니미세 남주 따버 뒤주 따버리시 요마 자당아주 세주 자산 차선 이안에 그 깔라 대쇼고 줍치서고
So beginning from today at the Segyu Dasang or Segyu monastery, if you like, we have the, let's see what we could call Chakasamvara establishing and offering. So for a couple of days, anyway, so we have that practice. So this is and this is something that's it's like the the more extensive way of doing it. So what that means is it involves constructing a sand mandala. So Chakasamvara sand mandala. So that's something that we start today, and that will take 5 days to do. So then after those 5 days that are spent, constructing the sand mandala. Then we have 1 day of preparatory practices. And then we have from the 14th of this month up to the 19th, we have the actual accomplishing or establishing the mandala and then making offerings. So this is something we don't do all the time. This is something that, you know, at our monastery, the Segyu monastery, it's done during the what we call the yane or the rains retreat. No.
아니 딘데 인자 대가데 중주 소상 가 도르와
No.
여기 겸도 디지그리 아니 딘데 전에 주주직제 아니 디제라 중주 차소나 배지 다리 니슈라 인데조기 제바 베듀쿠세 베듀쿠세마 실루 마 피고요 먼저 대조 제바 베듀쿠세 대조 자주당 아니 삽제 아니 제바 숨데 냠도 마 잔이 마 셰고요 네가 배지 님 고고리
Còn chỉ là the Sagyuche.
제바
No, Japa.
삽제
Sabche.
디숨데 마 잔 아니 마 대조 콜마 제바데 마 셰고요
Bedunguzegi de Shelung Chidugana and it didn't done and it Sagyu Japa.
자주다 제바
No. Nima.
니마 바지 투스 고거리 니마가 투
Then, so of course, you know, when these things are happening, I have to attend as the abbot. You know, of course, I have to attend. So then, on the 20th of this month, then I need to offer an explanatory transmission of a very important Chakrasamvara text, which is called the Bedungkunsa, so complete illumination of the hidden meaning. And that has to be done along with the explanation of the root tantra, the commentary, and also the outlines. So this is something that takes about 6 days. No.
Today, Jeda, Dari Nishu Sajila, Sojon Kikyo, Sojon. Sojon Kidu Samba, and it Namju Sojon Dari Yane Gabu Sojon di Sojon Dojeva di Ma Kimbe Loto Ma Lago Samba, di Tuju Desokova, Dari Nishu Sajila. Dojeva della Shugo Sunju Tambayori, and Namju Daddy Ma Loto Lav Tichu Samba, and Tande Dawadina La Jeza. Then on the 21st, we have the Sojong, so the Poshada, which means the confession ceremonies for the monks. Now, this is something generally we do on a regular basis, but now here during the range retreat, we do an extensive version of that. So that involves the abbot, you know, myself having to recite like 30 pages of the Vinaya, the Sojong text from memory. No, so I have to recite it by heart. In other words. And it's because of having all that to do this particular month that this month we were only able to have this one session. No. Then after that, you know, we already have, you know, fixed the days for the next session and the following sessions. No. Zawe Seju Chazandi, Tomar, Godoma, Casoro Goma, Chatawadi, Chikton Shibja Nishabjela, Gozubri.
Chikton Shibja
Nishabje.
Nishabje, Chikton Shibja Nishabje. No. This the Segyu monastery was founded in 1428.
The Gyümé Chazan, the Judu Chazan. 고마주 고나 세주 차장 고마 차 차바리.
So actually, what this means is that it was founded before the two monasteries, the Gyute Tantric College or the upper Tantric College, and the Gyümé Tantric College, the lower Tantric College. No.
대한 세주 차 등의 토마르데 아니 제르모치게 응올로 지주 시랍승기. 제르모치게 응올로 지주 시랍승기라 아니 다디 누주디 지주 시랍승기라 제르모치게 템바텔라 도당하게 템바니요라. 동하게 템바니요리. 동하게 템바니지나네 제르모치 나게 템바티 지트사디 지주 시랍승기라 지테바리.
And it was founded by Jijun Sherab Singye, who was a direct disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa. So Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings have the two aspects. You've got the sutra teachings and the tantric teachings. So Lama Tsongkhapa, in a sense, sort of like conferred or entrusted the tantric teachings to this Jijun Sherab Singye.
Rwa Jermochi Sera la Penny, Sera Gombala Penny, any Nag Sungju Nang be Kavla, any Shu de la Ya, any Nag Peja Keshu, Jabashita. Hakoson.
No, Jabashita.
Nag Peja Keshu, Jabashita, the Peja de la Walla Ki, Jermocha la Walla, the Snamche, and Tadi, Dabu Jatunge. Curando Chusung Taloma Kaba Mamushita, and Dinalia, that did double jet to a Suyavas, Masumarwa. This so in the summer, and come to do Kedu Muchi, the Jetamuchi, your day in a young, and Konsuji, the Mazomason, Kelly Chimaton, and Jizu Sheriff singing Dinalia Lanche, and Chasun Se, and that's Sanga Tamba the Negi in Page, Zinjum Person Chia, the Chigi, and Kelly Shuri.
So how that happened is that Rinpoche went to Sera Monastery, and he had with him the most important tantric text, which is called the Dabashirak. So the what do you call it? The somehow intertwined, fourfold intertwined commentaries. So this is, as I said, the most important tantric text. And so Lama Tsongkhapa said he had many of his disciples there with him, and he said, so there are many great masters and great scholars amongst you. So who of you is willing to take the responsibility for the tantric teachings? And present at that time were Lama Tsongkhapa's leading, senior disciples, Gyaltsabje and Kedrubje, but they, and in fact nobody in the assembly, was able to take that responsibility, except for Jijun Sherab Singye, who stood up, made 3 prostrations, and said that he would take responsibility to uphold and to protect and to promulgate this teaching. No.
Any Jijun Sherab Singye, any Sangagi, that Bage Chazang Su, Jijun Sherab Singye, in Mage, Zanga Lumbala Tanda, Seju Chazandi, Jijun Sherab Singye, in Chata, but is
Zangla, no. And then, then Jijun Sherab Singye founded this monastery, Sigyu Monastery, the first of the tantric monasteries in the area of Tibet called Tsang. No.
Jijun Sherab Singye, the Chatam, any Seju Gomba Zingengi, Mazomason, Kembo Mason, Tango, Dunaba Pande Sambo.
Dunapa Palan Sambo.
Pande Sambo.
And the first abbot, so he founded it, right, Jijun Sherab Singye, but the first abbot was called Dunapa Palan Zangbo. Dulnapa Palan Zambo.
Oh, Korangi 통마 다 지주시라서 차트는 누나바 반대 상보다 지제네 누나바 반대 상보네 주제 단 단다보도 니 캠보좀 바마도스제네 중바래 yes.
No. Yes, so it was founded by Geshe Singye, and then he sort of handed responsibility for the monastery to Dunapa Balanzampo, and so then he became that, the first abbot.
我接着我把这句查上恰到当地，同嘛就阿不进的底线的，因谈到不都他都是讲的，我把就是恰的了的，因他的恰了，他大家那练的，因我把的了，他俺的配了呀，告诉了，蓝水有吧，上万这边中居说呀，别说个中居说呀，几个中居说呀，都推了呀，错就经过乡。 And so
that's how it started, and it's continued for many years in Tibet, and now we have it in India, and we do still conduct these practices just like I described for Chakrasamvara. There's also, we do this for the Guya Samaja, including the Sanmandala and also Yamantaka.
just to go Taganashi, Kimbu Mashia, the Bedu Kuseri, Javashitari, in Gigi, Totu, Tidema, Tavalma, Lorena Mashia Gugnoris.
Bedinguse,
Devashita, Gigi, Totu.
Togdunra.
Togdun's a Pejacheva, Gigi Totu.
And then, from the side of the abbot, there is the responsibility each year to give these teachings on the Bedun Kunsel, so the complete illuminator of the hidden meaning. Then these 4 interwoven commentaries, I think is the word actually, 4 interwoven commentaries, and then there is the sevenfold analysis of Vajrabhaira. There's that text also that has to be taught each year.
Oh, in this any things that Tanda Nimbo de Tare Dawadilla, and Jumju Soyata, Bedukuselaya, the Indusamba, and to this not Chava Sabchat there is.
So anyway, the essential point then is because of all of this going on this month, I'm really very busy, and so that's why we've only got 1 session this month.
And how do you Tandi the show Jumju Sobe Kabla? Any King go to Shang, any the show any King go than Jenny, any Chova Pia, the Danjulea, the GC Pia, the Tindig Jumba, Nimanga to go, Tindig Kabla, any Kiranzogi, Susugi, Simgi, Logic Tony, and Tindig. Choga Zachimudi, that the Choga the Zachim started, Tindig Choga Zachim with the Sumber Golian, Susugi, Dilea, Java Swag, Chedu, any Logic Tony, and the Carson, Takumonga Jews, so that the ancient Puyina, Madiva Ko Maris.
So anyway, while all this is going on, from your side, if you want to make some kind of connection with that, to be involved with that, then if you wanted to make some kind of small offering, even if it was just a few dollars, then that should be okay. You could do if you wanted to. If that's something you want to do,
Or did this something to Shubais and Dawa Jemal anyone children Bashido, Matu Sotoya,
and then anyway, so that's just by the way. And then, as I say, so then at the next month, then we'll meet again.
Okay.
Okay.
Indeed, Tanda, when the Tendri Mango Sheva in do Samba, Tindri Tolan, Susu, Ni Sheva Tom to Mayimba, Kiranzo Ranging when some Luna, Javachen, any only Tene Truba, Tindela,
and the Kugimindu. Did Kugimindula? And the Kugimindu. Mindo. Kugimindu. Yeah.
Oh, hello. Cheta Tendri Kola Samlayana to Tamba Yina. 때네 춥다다 때네 춥다다 나랑도 지기지라 땡기 편주 지기지라 땡기 왜 남샤디 뭐 쳐보지나 편주 땜바디 저와 매버고네 땡고야게 다 잠바다 닌지기 삼로 빼고야 딘데 삼로 따야라 땡데 편도 용거지.
So anyway, we've been talking a lot about dependent origination, and so I really do think that if you are willing to, put some effort and time into thinking about dependent origination, you will find that it supports your practice of, loving kindness, compassion, and so forth. So that's it then, really. Now I can't remember. Do we have some finishing prayers?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll see everyone on October 4th.
October 4th, okay. Dagi Jinye Sape Kewa De Tendandro Akun La Temben Langkia Pa Jesu No Santra Bai Tembe Nimbo Ring Saje Sho. Next page.
October 4th.
Saje Bagi Juji Meto Tra Dira Vijini De Kembate Sange Jindu Mitebe Rogun Namda Jingla Chepa Sho Eta Guru Radna Mendala Kani Dayani Jamba Pao Jita Kemba Dankundu Zambo Deyan Dejin Dakungi Jesu Dalo Jigyawa Did Tamche Rabdu Ngo Dusum Shepe Kyawa Tamche Moa Kanla Chotu Ngapate Dagi Kewe Sawa Didi Sambo Churchi Rabdu Moa Kare Rave Kore Shingam De Pendan Dewa Malu Jungwen Ne Chenrezi Wonten Zingatso Ye Chabe Site Badu Tengyu Chi. No, it's Tujina. Kalishu.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank
So,
you, Enrique.
just in case anybody's here still, there's a few people here, but anyway, the link was in the chat, I think, right? But anyway, maybe we can send it out.
I can. I'll send the website out to everyone. That's not a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Via email. Yeah.
Okay.
All
Night,
right.
everybody. Night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Venerable.